You know, there are some crazy misconceptions when it comes to firearms, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Is I give you 7 more misconceptions about guns. Now, no matter if you say misconceptions, myths, or just straight up lies, it doesn't matter how you categorize it. Unfortunately, a lot of these things people just either don't know, or some people will use as a tactic to scare people or confuse them to get them on their side. Now, don't take that the wrong way. If you are totally pro-gun or completely anti-gun, I want you to watch the video so that way you get an idea and get the truth behind a lot of these things, so then you'll have the information and it may not change your mind, maybe it will, but either way you will know the facts. Because unfortunately, when it comes to guns, it's one of the few things in our society where people can literally have no idea what they're talking about, and yet their opinions are validated by others that just simply agree with them based on feelings, not facts. And so that's what I'm here today to do, is to give you those facts about firearms. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. You could also join us on Patreon or join the channel right here and gain access to some pretty cool perks. Let's go and get started. Now, the first one I want to talk about is a huge one, and that is background checks. Background checks are a common tactic used by people that do not like firearms to say that, people can just, willy-nilly go out there and buy any gun they want and they will never go through a background check. And of course, gun shows are one of the main areas they focus on. So if you've ever been to a gun show or you haven't, when you walk in, you are going to see tables and tables full of guns and dealers behind those tables. And so unless those dealers want to lose their license, hence their livelihood, and probably catch a felony at the same time, they're not going to take a chance at selling you a gun. That's important, obviously, but another important point is that firearm dealers don't make a ton of money per gun. It's actually a lot more minimal than what you may think. So for them to take a chance, obviously they want to sell guns, and by selling a lot of guns is how dealers make good money. But at the same time, they're not hitting a home run with every single gun sold. And so they're not going to be willing to lose everything I just talked about for not even a lot of money just to sell you a gun without a background check. And the vast majority of guns sold in this country are done through the background check system. I believe since 1998, over 320 million checks have been done through the NICS system. Now, there's some partial truth here, okay? If I go to a gun shop and I meet a private dealer, then yes, there are states that allow you to sell that gun as long as you are not selling to a known felon. And the same stipulations apply. I'm not going to take a chance to make some money to sell a gun to a known felon, because when you ask the majority of gun owners out there, do they want guns in the hands of criminals? The answer is almost always no. Actually, everybody I've ever personally asked is no. And I can't speak for everybody, but again, I would just taking a guess, 98, 99% of gun owners out there that are already following the law, going through procedures, going through background checks, not hurting anybody, I would bet that they do not want these in the hands of criminals. Now, you may be thinking, well, not going through a background check is a bad idea. Well, if I sell to my mom, my dad, a good friend of mine, sister, brother, cousin, uncle, people that I actually know, it's kind of like a check and balance in a way. And you really have to believe that the Second Amendment was put there in place to reject a government that could become tyrannical. If you don't believe that, then you're never going to understand why some people are opposed to every single gun getting a background check. But I can assure you, the vast majority are going through an FFL and they are getting a background check performed. Next thing I want to talk about is online sales. So you will hear people commonly say you can just order a gun right off of the internet and it's shipped right to your door. But then again, we have a problem here, because whenever you go to buy a gun online, it is true that you can do it without a background check. You can pay for that thing and you can have it shipped, but they make you ship it to an FFL. Now you may say, well, I can get an FFL. Yes, you can. You can get a home-based FFL as well, but that means you've went through the background check system in order to do that. And an even more intensive background check if you want to look at it like that. So yes, it's true. I can go on, I can pay for that gun, I can check out, But I got to send it to an FFL, and when I go to pick it up at the FFL, that's where I will then do my background check. Now, this does not apply to some guns that are made before 1898. So if you look at the trapdoor that's behind me, muskets, or, any of those antique guns, yes, those guns can be shipped directly to your home. People that have CNR, so curio and relics, and I believe the statute is like over 50 years old. If they hold those licenses, so your cars, your Car 98K, your Mausers, your whatever, those types of guns, M1 Garands, if it is over, and again, I believe it's 50 years old, I'll have to double check and make sure that I put that up in the title here so I have the accurate information. But again, if you have one of those licenses, then you can have them shipped to your home. But like I said, again, the vast majority of online sales are going through an FFL. Most people, regular people, do not have FFLs. And even if they do, they've went through a series of background checks to make sure that they can possess a firearm. Now I want to talk about one more thing when it comes to background checks, because this is a common ploy by people that are either uninformed or they know how the process works, but they don't want to admit that the system itself, the NICS system, which is the background check system, actually does work when the information is put into place. So you will hear a common theme is we need to strengthen background checks. Now, the background check system, the FBI actually pulls from 3 different sources in order to get their information. But all of that information is highly dependent upon states to actually enter the correct information and make it clear that you have somebody that is a prohibited person and they cannot own a firearm. This is the same thing that happened in Sutherland Springs in Texas. There was a court martial against that gunman, and he was not supposed to have a gun. I think he choked his wife and then hurt his little child. That's pretty awful stuff, and yet the information wasn't put in there either clearly, or they didn't make it clear that, hey, he had a dishonorable discharge from the military and he's a prohibited person. Right here in my backyard, the AME shooting, right? That guy bought a Glock, and I know his name, but I'm just not going to mention his name because it's not worth it, but he bought a Glock. There was a 3-day waiting period, and after that 3-day waiting period, he was able to take possession of that, but he should have never gotten to that point. And again, the information wasn't put in correctly. There was a study done from 2014 that said there were 7.8 million active warrants, and yet only 2.1 million of those were in the system. And let's be honest here, the background check system is not typically for criminals. Now, yes, there have been people that have been stopped at the background check process, but most criminals aren't willing to do that. They want to get their guns illegally and or steal them, and so they're not following the background check system as it is. This is literally just a way to kind of make sure that law-abiding gun owners are put through the paces because, again, they're going to follow the law. Next thing I want to talk about is shoulder stocks and pistols. And so I want to go a little bit different route here. We've heard a lot about pistol braces and things like that. But this right here, when I do this, right, these things, they're 2 independent of each other. When I do this, right, this could actually be a felony, what I just did, if this was a repro or if this was a repro. Now, any of your Mausers, your high powers, your Lugers, your even 1911s, a lot of them back then in the, before World War I and during World War I, up to World War II, really, a lot of them had slots in the pistol grip that would allow you to use one of these stocks. And the stock actually doubles as a holster. So you can see the belt loop that's right there. And so, of course, they did this because they wanted to be able to increase the accuracy and range with a pistol. Now, when you think about it, it's pretty impractical, okay, because this really doesn't have a lot of great features that makes it into an SBR, but you can get a little bit more stability out of it if you want to use it like this. So even though it died off, of course, it's not like this is totally useless. It actually was a pretty cool system. And again, you'll see a lot of these old guns that have that slot in the grip. But again, if I take this and let's say I just had the pistol and then I bought a reproduction stock, if I put that reproduction stock on my antique or military surplus pistol, now I'm a felon. Or the other way, if I have an original stock and I buy a reproduction Mauser, High Point, or anything like that, and I put it on there, I'm still a felon. You may be asking, well, what's the difference? Exactly. That's what we all ask ourselves when we talk about SBRs and all of this kind of stuff. It really just, it makes no sense whatsoever. But if you want to keep from becoming a felon, you should know this. If you have these antiques, they are fine to put together, to shoot, to use, just like what you see right here, as long as they're from the same time period. The next common misconception I want to talk about revolves around full autos. There are a lot of gun people that don't even know that you can own full autos. Now, I had a chance to actually shoot full autos for the first time ever, believe it or not, very recently, within the past month actually. We had a shoot at a local range, and one of the guys there, has a lot of these. So I was able to shoot, full auto MP5, Uzi, a baby saw, and an HKG 36, which has kind of become my new obsession, but I'll talk about that here in the future. But either way, you can actually own these. Now, if you are just a private citizen, yes, you can buy these. And of course, you're going to have to go through the same background checks, $200 tax stamp, a long waiting period, fingerprints, photo cards, all of that stuff that you would normally do to buy a suppressor. All of this stuff is under the NFA Act. But what happened in 1986 is Ronald Reagan signed into law the Gun Owners Protection Act. And it actually restricted gun owners more than protecting them. Now, there is some truth to them protecting, FFLs and stuff, because they would get harassed by the ATF. And so in order to alleviate that, that was a part of this bill. But also the ownership of machine guns became illegal. So anything made before 1986, you could buy. Anything made after, you couldn't. But there's an exception to that. So let's say you're that same private citizen that just went through everything I just talked about with the tax stamp and the waiting period and all of this kind of stuff. You still have to pay a premium for that machine gun, and you can only own a machine gun or full auto that was made before 1986, meaning the supply on those is very limited, and so the price you're going to pay is super high. Now, I was actually talking to a guy that bought one of the pre-ban lowers actually for like $600 back then. These guns were like, $1,000 back then. And now that same lower, full auto lower, is like, I don't know, 12 or 14 grand. It is an insane amount of money for anything made before 1986. Or you can become an FFL and pay a special occupation tax. So this means you've went through the rigmarole, you've done your background checks, you've went through all this stuff to get your FFL, you paid the special occupation tax, and now you can buy full autos. And you can get them transferred to you a lot quicker than what a private citizen can. And that is the key to it. Not only are they way less expensive for new full auto stuff, but again, you've already gone through all of that stuff, and now you can legally own full autos. So again, if you're a private citizen or an FFL with an SOT, you can own full autos. Now, I'll be honest with you, I had a freaking blast shooting full autos. I mean, it was a lot of fun. I was excited. Every time I got, from behind the gun, I had a smile on my face. And you may be asking, well, why do you need a full auto? Well, again, they are just so much freaking fun, and that's the majority of people. Again, and I can obviously say this because full autos are not used in crimes out there. It's always semi-autos, and most of the time it's pistols. Again, I cover more of that in the first video, but full autos aren't used in crimes. Full autos are used for people that are just super into guns and they want to have an amazing time. And it is legal to own them, and it's just incredible how many people don't actually know that. Now, next thing I want to talk about is pertaining to concealed carry. Now, every time I do a video on this subject, there will be people that say, man, this is a tired argument, we've gotten past this point, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, not only do those videos normally get a lot of views, but a lot of comments like, man, I didn't know that. This makes me feel so much more comfortable. And what I'm talking about is carrying with the round in the chamber. Now, when you look at new manufactured pistols, when they list the capacity, it almost always says the capacity plus 1. 10, 11, 12, 20, whatever, it always has that plus 1. I can't say always, that would be absolute, but 99% of the time, it's going to have that plus 1 annotation. And the reason is, even if your gun does not have a physical safety, there are safeties that are built in. Now, of course, Glock, made this a part of their marketing, and they did an incredible job, and almost every manufacturer has followed since then. So you have things like trigger bar safeties, firing pin blocks, hammer blocks, transfer bars. All of these things are a form of a safety. So no matter if that chamber has a round in it, unless you physically pull the trigger, the gun cannot go off. So essentially, think about it as the firing pin is here, but with that firing pin block, there's no way for the firing pin to go forward and actually strike the primer. And the only way for that to happen is if the trigger's pulled. The only tired part of this argument is the inevitable person, or maybe a couple people, that'll say, yeah, unless you own a P320, ha ha ha. That's really the tired part of this argument. These things are drop safe, if you drop them, throw them, whatever the case may be, unless that trigger is pulled back to the rear, the gun cannot go off. And so why is this important? Well, it saves valuable time where time is not on your side. Most self-defense situations, things happen very quickly. And so if you believe that you are going to be so self-aware, you're going to see this thing happen before it does. We'd all like to believe that, but the fact is that that is not how reality works. Unfortunately, it's just the way it is. These things happen so quickly, and so you need to save those precious, half of a second or a second, whatever it is, to actually load that gun. You need to know that that gun is loaded and you are able to protect yourself, your family, and people around you. Not only that, malfunctions happen whenever you go to chamber a round. How many of you have been at the range and that first round you chambered, for whatever reason, it didn't go up the feed ramp correctly, but it just kind of, the round just kind of lodged on the feed ramp, and you had to, rack it again, lock it back to the rear, pull the mag out. All of these things can happen, especially when you're stressed. Who's to say that you are going to get a good hold on that slide and actually rack it fully back to the rear? Who's to say you even rack it back to the rear, far enough to chamber a round? So then you may think you have chambered a round. You didn't. You pull the trigger and nothing happens. So again, these are all things to think about, and through proper discipline, keeping your booger finger off of the trigger until you're ready to fire, and even dry firing practice and just knowing you're drawing out of your holster, and always, always, always keeping your finger off of the trigger until you are on that threat. You can practice this at the range. You can practice it while you watch The Walking Dead. Whatever, it doesn't matter. You can practice this all the time. And so that way you've built up that muscle memory, and you know that you're not going to put your finger on that trigger until you have actually got your gun on that threat that is trying to hurt you or your family. Carrying with a round in the chamber, in my opinion, is the only way to do it. And there's some ways you can do this and actually get really comfortable with it at the same time. And the last thing I want to talk about is that the United States has the most amount of gun deaths out there, and by removing guns, we will actually have less crime. But that's just a single part of it. It's actually a small part, because you really need to look at violent crime rates. And violent crime is a broad term that's used, but still, it's kind of all in its name. It's all encompassing of violent crimes, right? People have used everything from planes to cars, to knives and hammers to hurt and unalive other people. And it's a shame. But unfortunately, if somebody has the intention of doing harm, it doesn't matter what tool is at their disposal to do that, they're going to use it. So if you actually look at it on just the surface of, gun homicides in the United States, right? You say 35 to 40,000 people. You might say, heck, that's a lot. And while it is, it doesn't tell the entire story either, because the vast majority of those are gang-related, people that unalive themselves, accidental shootings. All of those things are encompassed in that number. And then when you look at violent crime compared to the United States throughout the world, you'll start to see actually a lot of countries in South America, Mexico, Haiti, Honduras, South Africa. All of these places have a really high violent crime rate. But again, even if you are totally against private gun ownership on any level, you still have to come to the realization that it is always used when it comes to tragedies. This argument is always used when it comes to those tragedies. Very rarely will you hear about this topic like on a broad term or a nationwide conversation in just normal times, right? Because if that was the case, they would be raising this issue all of the time in some of the most violent cities in America. They don't do that. They wait for, some of these more tragic events to happen, and then that's when they jump on the opportunity. But anytime violent crime gets brought up or mental health gets brought up, that kind of just gets shoved to the side. Nope, it's just the guns. We remove the guns, and then we're good. Now, I elaborate more on this in my first video, and I talk, more statistics and things like that. But again, you have to look at the violent crime. You got to look at the economical situation in other parts of the country. It is, not only mental health, it's also, economical status, and all of these things play a role. And typically where you will see the worst economies in the world is where you will see violent crime come up. Poverty, that is also in relation to high crime as well. If you look at stores that are closing in San Francisco and Oakland, again, poverty, high crime, all of this stuff plays a role in, what people actually do. And so I would say, if you focus on the mental health aspect, you focus on the economy, get somebody in charge that actually knows what they're doing as well. That's a separate story. But also just, lifting people up, that will, obviously take a lot of the hardships out of people's lives and hopefully make them less willing to do crimes. And honestly, this starts at childhood as well. Promoting, again, having two parents in the household, that kind of thing really just is what this country specifically needs to get back to in order to, again, lift people up. Impoverished areas, instead of giving handouts, actually lift those people up, give them opportunities so they can help themselves and, again, be successful at the same time. That's just my opinion, though, and these are 7 more wild misconceptions about firearms. I'd love to hear your opinion. No matter if you agree or disagree, let me know down below. Again, if you like what I do, consider subscribing. You could also join us on Patreon or join the channel right here and gain access to some pretty cool perks. Thank you guys for watching. See you in the next one. And as always, hold them down.